Listen, there's a big difference between being alone and being lonely. Don't confuse the two. Some of the strongest people you'll ever meet built themselves in silence. They weren't surrounded by crowds. They weren't clapping hands. They weren't depending on applause. They were alone with their thoughts, their vision, their grind. And let me tell you something. If you can't handle your own company, how do you expect the world to handle you? People run from silence like it's punishment. They need noise. They need distractions. They need somebody or something around them at all times, just so they don't face themselves. But the truth is, your greatest power begins when you stop running, when you sit down in that empty room and say, I'm enough. My presence is enough. My energy is enough. That's not loneliness, that's strength. Loneliness is when you feel incomplete. Aloneness is when you realize you are complete. You got to stop waiting on somebody else to validate you, to cheer for you, to save you. Because the hard fact is people come and people go. Crowds cheer, then crowds forget. But if you've trained yourself to walk alone without feeling empty, you'll never be shaken when the world leaves you, standing by yourself. The legends, the greats, the real difference makers. They had nights of silence, seasons of solitude. They weren't afraid of their own reflection. They weren't begging for company just to feel alive. They understood that alone doesn't mean weak. It means building in private so you can shine in public. So when life puts you in that space, when friends stop calling, when the room feels quiet, when the phone stays dry, don't panic, don't chase, don't beg. Learn to embrace it, learn to own it. Because in that silence, you'll hear the voice that matters most, your own. And when you learn to love your own voice, your own vision, your own presence, you become unstoppable. Master your own company, because if you can't sit with yourself, if you can't enjoy your own silence, your own thoughts, your own energy, then no one else in this world will ever be enough for you. Think about it. How many people do you know who jump from one relationship to another, one friendship to another, one crowd to another, just because they can't handle being alone for a single night? They feel empty the second the room goes quiet. They panic when the phone doesn't buzz. That's not love. That's not confidence. That's dependency. And dependency will always keep you chained to people who don't deserve you just because you're afraid to face yourself. Confidence doesn't come from being surrounded. It doesn't come from likes, followers, or constant approval. Confidence comes from the day you look in the mirror and say, I'm enough. When you can eat alone in a restaurant without feeling ashamed, when you can walk into a movie theater by yourself and not care about the stares, when you can spend an entire weekend alone and still feel fulfilled, that's real strength. Most people run from those situations because they've never built a bond with themselves. They don't know their own power because they're too busy being fueled by others. You see, when you master your own company, you stop chasing temporary fixes. You stop begging for attention because your attention is enough. You stop depending on someone else to cheer you up because you've learned how to lift your own spirit. That's where the real freedom is. The moment you stop being a prisoner of loneliness and start being the king or queen of solitude. Think of the great achievers, the dreamers who changed the game. They all had seasons of isolation. They knew how to shut out the noise. They knew how to walk their own path without a crowd behind them. And that's exactly why when they stood in front of the world, they were unshakable. Because they had already mastered themselves when no one was watching. Every single day you spend avoiding your own company is a day you delay your greatness. The conversations you're afraid to have with yourself, the doubts, the fears, the insecurities, those are the battles that make you bulletproof once you face them. Alone is not your enemy, it's your training ground. And if you can't stand to be with yourself, you'll never stand tall with anyone else. Silence builds strength because in silence, you discover what the noise has been hiding from you all along. The world is loud. People talk. Social media screams. Distractions pull at you every second of the day. Everywhere you turn, there's somebody telling you who you should be, what you should want, what success looks like, what happiness means. And the more you let that noise in, the more you forget the sound of your own voice. That's why most people are lost. They've been so drowned in outside noise that they can't even recognize themselves anymore. But silence is where you strip it all away. No likes, no opinions, no comparisons. Just you and the raw truth of who you are. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how your sharpest ideas, your deepest realizations, come when the room is quiet? That's not an accident. Noise distracts, silence sharpens. When you sit in silence, the mind starts to clear. The chaos settles. You begin to hear thoughts you've been ignoring, feelings you've been running from, answers you couldn't find when you were busy drowning in everybody else's voice. That's why the quiet moments reveal what the crowd can't. Your real self, the version of you that isn't performing for anyone, isn't bending to please anyone, isn't pretending just to fit in. Most people are terrified of silence. They need music playing, TV on, endless scrolling, anything to avoid that stillness. Why? Because silence forces you to confront yourself. It forces you to deal with the doubts, the fears, the insecurities that you keep burying under noise. But here's the truth. Those who dare to sit with silence, those who learn to master it, walk out of it sharper, stronger, more focused than anyone else. Imagine a boxer before the fight. The crowd goes wild, but he's calm. He's trained in silence, hit the bag in silence, pushed through pain when nobody was clapping. That's why he's unshakable when the lights come on. Life works the same way. Your power isn't built in front of the crowd. It's built in those quiet hours when nobody is watching, when the world is asleep and you're face with your grind, your vision, your truth. Silence is not empty, it's full of answers. The people who learn to embrace it become dangerous in the best way. They see clearer, they move smarter, they act with precision. They don't need the noise because the silence gave them something far more valuable, unbreakable strength. Stop chasing validation because the more you run after approval, the further you drift from yourself. We live in a world where people measure their worth by numbers. How many likes, how many followers, how many claps, how many people are watching. And the sad truth is, most of those claps are hollow. Most of those cheers are temporary. The same crowd that praises you today will forget you tomorrow. If your happiness is tied to their applause, then your happiness will collapse the moment the noise dies down. That's why you have to learn to clap for yourself when no one else is clapping. Think about it. The person who posts a picture and then keeps refreshing the screen, waiting for the hearts to roll in. That's someone starving for approval. The student who only feels proud when the teacher praises them. The worker who only feels valuable when the boss notices them. The dreamer who gives up because no one believed in them. That's what happens when you hand over your confidence to other people. You can't let outsiders decide how much you're worth. If you do, you'll always be their prisoner. Clap for yourself when you achieve something small. You woke up early. Clap for yourself. You went to the gym when you didn't feel like it. Clap for yourself. You took one step toward your dream, even when no one saw it. Clap for yourself. Because those private claps, those silent victories, those are the moments that build unstoppable confidence. The world might never see your late nights, your sacrifices, your quiet grind, but you see it. And if you don't celebrate it, who will? Look at the greats, the game changers. Do you think they waited for people to believe in them? No, they believed in themselves first. They clapped in the silence when nobody understood their vision. They kept building when people laughed. They kept pushing when people doubted. And by the time the world finally stood up and applauded, they didn't need it anymore because their validation was already rooted inside. When you stop chasing validation, you take your power back. You stop being a puppet pulled by other people's strings. You move different, you talk different, you shine different. Because you know your worth, whether the crowd cheers or not. That's real freedom. When the only approval you need is staring back at you in the mirror. Alone time equals growth time because solitude is not wasted space. It is the most powerful investment you can ever make in yourself. When you are alone, you have a choice: wasted scrolling, complaining, waiting for someone to entertain you, or use it as the sharpest weapon to build yourself into something greater. Most people fear being alone because they think it means being forgotten. But the truth is, alone time is the exact place where transformation begins. It's the gym for your mind, the workshop for your soul, the training ground where you shape the version of yourself the world has yet to meet. When you are around people all the time, their voices, their opinions, their energy, whether good or bad, will always influence you. But when you are alone, the only voice left is yours, and that's when the real growth happens. Alone time gives you the chance to read and feed your mind with wisdom, to build skills that can take you from ordinary to extraordinary, to think deeply about where you are and where you want to go. Alone time is when the athlete trains before the stadium fills, when the writer bleeds words onto a blank page before anyone reads them, when the entrepreneur plans, moves in silence before the world sees the success. Think about the strongest people you admire. Their growth didn't happen in the spotlight. It happened in the shadows, in those countless hours of solitude where they worked when nobody was cheering. They sacrificed parties for practice, noise for focus, distractions for discipline. That's the price of greatness, embracing alone time as your partner, not your enemy. Most people waste solitude by filling it with noise, drowning themselves in meaningless distractions just to kill time. But the ones who rise, the ones who level up, they treat solitude like gold. They use it to learn a new skill, sharpen their craft, dig deeper into their purpose, and prepare themselves for opportunities others won't be ready for. Alone time is the secret weapon because while everyone else is running from it, you're using it to grow. You can't transform in the crowd. You transform in the quiet. You don't find your vision in chaos. You find it in solitude. And the day you realize that every moment you spend alone is a chance to build a stronger, wiser, more dangerous version of yourself, you'll stop fearing it and start craving it. Aloneness is power, not weakness, because being alone does not mean you've been abandoned. It means you've built the strength to stand without leaning on anyone else. Society tries to convince you that if you're alone, you're broken, you're missing something, you're not complete. But the truth is, the strongest warriors, the sharpest minds, the real difference makers, at some point, they walk their path alone. And that solitude wasn't punishment, it was power. It was the proof that they didn't need a crowd to validate them. They didn't need applause to keep moving. They didn't need constant company to feel alive. People fear aloneness because they confuse it with loneliness. Loneliness is emptiness, but aloneness is fullness. It is the moment you realize you are whole, even when nobody else is around. That's real strength. When you don't crumble just because the phone doesn't ring, when you don't feel worthless just because nobody's checking on you, when you can walk into a room with no one on your side and still hold your head high. That's not weakness, that's an unshakable spirit. Think about it, a tree standing alone in the open field grows deeper roots than the ones crowded together in the forest. Why? Because it doesn't have neighbors to lean on, so it digs deeper. It grows stronger. It becomes capable of withstanding storms that would tear others down. That's what aloneness does for you. It forces you to build strength within yourself that no outside force can shake. Look at daily life. The student who studies in silence while everyone else is out partying. The athlete training alone in the dark while others are distracted. The dreamer staying up late working on their vision with nobody clapping for them. At first, they might look isolated. They might look like outsiders. But when the results show, when the transformation is undeniable, the same people who pitied their aloneness suddenly admire their power, because what looked like weakness was actually the strongest foundation being built. Aloneness teaches you independence. It teaches you resilience. It teaches you how to carry yourself when the crowd disappears, how to keep moving when no one is by your side, how to shine even in silence. When you master aloneness, you become untouchable because you're no longer relying on a fragile support system. You've built your own unbreakable strength within. At the end of the day, everything comes down to this. If you can stand tall when the world walks away, if you can love yourself in silence, if you can fight your battles without the crowd cheering, then you are already unstoppable. Don't ever mistake solitude for weakness. Solitude is where kings are crowned, where warriors sharpen their swords, where legends are born. The world will try to make you believe you are small when you are alone, but hear me clearly. Some of the greatest victories in history were written in the dark, in silence, with no audience, no spotlight, no applause. Stop fearing the empty room, because that's where you'll find the loudest answers. Stop chasing the crowd, because the crowd is fickle. It will love you today and forget you tomorrow. Build yourself so solid that even if every voice goes silent, your own roar is enough to keep you moving. Don't live for the claps of others, live for the fire within you. As Denzel Washington once said, fall forward. Every failed experiment is one step closer to success. If you're willing to walk alone, to grind in the shadows, to trust your own process, you will rise above the noise. Understand this life is not about who stands with you. It's about whether you can stand when no one does. The weak collapse when they're alone, but the strong rise higher than ever because they don't need the crowd. They don't need the recognition. They don't need the validation. They know their value before the world even sees it. That's the difference between those who settle and those who conquer. So the next time you find yourself alone, don't sink, stand. Don't complain, create. Don't wait for someone to come and rescue you. Become the hero of your own story. Remember the words of Steve Jobs. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Remember Muhammad Ali's fire? I hated every minute of training, but I said, don't quit, suffer now, and live the rest of your life as a champion. Remember that every great person You admire face seasons of solitude, and it was those seasons that built their greatness. Learn to be alone without being lonely. Learn to stand unshaken, unbroken, unapologetic in your own power. Because when you master yourself, when you embrace solitude as strength, the world can no longer control you. You become limitless.